everyone. Welcome to Keoster Live here on CKTV on YouTube. You're welcome back to the show, folks. We have done two of these live streams, these live shows, Google Hangouts, whatever you want to call them, so far since I came back on to the live aspect of things on YouTube, CKTV. I'm not too well at the minute. I've got a sore ear infection. On medications for that. That's you have to. The show must go on, as they say. The show must go on, and I'm here tonight to bring you. We're going to pay homage. Going to pay homage, if you like, to the country of Canada. It is Canada Day. It is the Canadian Independence Day today, the 1st of July. And I can tell you that I have a lot of there's a lot of big names that I really admire from Canada. A lot of big things that have went down in the country of Canada that is very admirable, and we have to pay homage to. You know what I mean? A lot of great talents have come from that very land. It's of course north of the United States. It's a very big country. It's the second largest country in the world. I'm talking area-wise. It doesn't have near as many people, obviously. It doesn't have the. It's not densely populated. The United States and Britain are examples that are densely populated, but Canada is very sparsely populated, very scarce with people as per mile, if you know what I mean. But indeed, it is the home of snow, maple leaves, maple syrup, and also the home of some of the greatest stars to ever grace sports, to ever grace film, to ever grace TV, and to ever grace the what was I going to say there? The silver screen film, yes, indeed. So we're going to talk about a few of the big names in Canadian history. We're going to, of course, if you just, as I said earlier on Facebook, hook it in and tune in. Pardon the pun. A few puns flying around here because, you love puns. With all due respect to Canada and all, we're not making fun. We're putting out a few puns. Not many people around here in Ireland, as that's where I am. I'm sitting on a chair in Ireland. Not many people here would probably think about doing something like this. So it's kind of original to bring out. A couple of years ago on In a Show and Live, a radio station I used to work with, I put on a show called similar to celebrate Canada Day, to celebrate Canadian Independence Day. And then a few days later, I put on another show to celebrate U.S. Independence Day, which is, of course, the 4th of July. And that I could be doing something this Sunday, maybe a live show, maybe a recorded show for the U.S. side of things as well. But indeed, I think Canada Day deserves something more because it's kind of, something that you don't cover all the time. So I think with Canada Day being here and it's all good fun, we're going to talk about people such as the legendary John Candy, one of the greatest film stars of all time. And of course, he was the greatest, one of the best comedy-wise as well. He, of course, was a big part of SCTV, which was a landmark and a big deal in Canada, in Toronto. Second City Television, of course, it was like the Canadian version of Saturday Night Live. Also, when you think about Bill Murray was immense. He was brilliant, and he really was amazing at comedy. And he went into more straight roles later in his career. But also, when you look at when you think of Canada, you think of ice hockey. I mean, I was getting prepared for this show. I was playing ice hockey. I was playing some ice hockey, folks. I was playing it on the Sega Mega Drive, but I was playing ice hockey. And when you think about it, back in the Sega Mega Drive, the ice hockey games were great. And they were, I've played them a lot, and that's why I said the Sega Mega Drive. I'm like rewinding 20 years here. But anyway, Um, Ice hockey, and when you think about Canada, you think of the WWF, the wrestling world. Of course, Bret the Hitman Hart, one of the biggest Canadian stars ever, was brought up in Stampede Wrestling, which was based around Calgary, Alberta. He went on to the WWF down in New York, and he, of course, got all his family members, of course, Owen and the British Bulldog, and Brian Pillman wasn't from Canada, but he got involved, and also people like Jim the Anvil Neidhart, the whole lot of them, the Hart Foundation, they became known as. You think about them when you think about Canada. You think about Wayne Gretzky, of course, one of the greatest ice hockey players of all time. He was a famous Canadian ice hockey player, and he, of course, made a big name for himself, winning the Stanley Cup on many occasions. You also, when you think about Canada, you think about people like Pamela Anderson. Like, she's brought a lot of things to the table when it comes to film, when it comes to TV, where she was in Baywatch, she was in films such as Barbed Wire, she was in TV shows such as VIP, and she, of course, was involved with Kid Rock and Tommy Lee. And she has so many things going on in the entertainment world. Pamela Anderson and Pamela Lee, whatever you want to call her, was a big deal. Also, Canada has brought us a lot more than that. We look into Canadian stuff now. We can look at some of the great facts about Canada, and there's some very interesting facts you might know about. So I'm going to shed a little light on them things, folks. Saying it is Canada Day, it is Canadian Independence Day, and we're going to talk about some Canadian stuff here. You know, it's very important to delve into our neighboring countries, even though it's not a neighboring country, really, it's across the Atlantic, but still another country. You have to look into these things to live life and make it more interesting. You got to look into these things. So, Ottawa is the capital of Canada, folks. And, you know, I'm not cheating. Look, I am looking at the screen. You see my face. I am not cheating. I'm not looking up this stuff. This shit just comes to me. It's fascinating. Toronto, largest city in Canada. How's that for you, folks? There's a bit of a fact for you, folks. You might have known it. Geography was probably one of my stronger topics in school, so I wasn't very strong at all, but it was probably one of my stronger. I hated school, folks. Anyway, they speak English. English is their first language in most of the provinces. French came in there. The French won over some of Canada and that, and they of course had a big. They were stationed in Quebec for a long time. Montreal being the capital of Quebec. There's a lot of history of Montreal. We look at the wrestling business. Bret Hart got screwed royally in Montreal, and also you got English and the French. They're speaking English and French. Ironically enough, the two countries hate each other, but they're both in there. They speak their languages in Canada. Also, interestingly, another little fact you might know, the ethnicity groups in Canada, white is 70%, Asian 14%, Aboriginal 4%, Black 2%. A few interesting facts for you there, folks. Latin American, actually 1.2%. That's a big surprise right there. Latin Americans, there's only 1.2 Latin Americans in Canada. So you'd imagine they would, you know, when they were crossing the border from Mexico and whatnot, they would run up and find refuge in Canada, but they decided to stop at the States, it looks like here, because there's only 1.2% are Latin American. But yeah, that's an interesting one there. 70% of the Canadian population is Caucasian, in other words, white. That's very interesting. 14%, the next one being Asian, which is also very strange because you'd wonder at that, like, you know what I mean? As I say, looking at you folks, I'm looking at the recording screen. I am not looking at Wikipedia here, folks. I hate looking at Wikipedia, so don't be thinking I am. But also, we've got the currency of Canada, the Canadian dollar. It looks like I'm looking at Wikipedia, doesn't it? You judge that one for yourselves. Also, a few things here with the Canadians. Well, I think we're going to move on and talk more about stuff like the big names from Canada. There's a lot of big names from Canada. We're going to talk a bit about each one of their careers and stuff, the ones that I'm very interested in. We're not going to talk about the more recent stars. They're boring. You know, you talk about them, you want to hear about them, go to TMZ or go to one of the other modern day websites that talk about what the last time they bought something or whatever. You know, I'm going to talk about the nostalgic 80s and 90s stars of Canada. You know what I mean? And I'm going to talk about some of the greatest legends in Canadian history. What about Neil Young? Neil Young is one of the greatest performers, musicians in the history of Canadian music. Like he has made a massive impact in Canadian culture and Canadian music over the years. A lot of big fans of Neil Young around here. I know that for a fact. He has had some great hits over the years. I'm not a big Neil Young fan, never have been, but I know he is very good quality at what he does. Alanis Morissette, of course, she had that amazing tune, Ironic, which was used recently in the movie, of course, The Internship with Vince Vaughn and Owen Wilson. So yes, that's a very popular song being used in media to this day, and that was one of the greatest tunes in history. I would play some of it, but with this new network thing I've got going on YouTube, I'm not really going to be using copyrights and stuff because it's kind of dodgy. And my account could be just taken down just like that if I use too much copyright material. So with these live shows, I won't be using any of that. You're going to have to make do with the talking and the stuff. I would like a better set, but I've got a blank thing at the back of me here, a white wall behind me here. I think it's more of a creamy colored wall, but we won't go into that. But I probably should have painted in the Canadian flag and the maple leaf and red and white, all that jazz, but I didn't. Sorry about that, folks. Sorry, you have to just look at me and look at my creamy wall behind me. But you know what I mean? It's all good. Avril Lavigne is from Canada. So did you know that? I did know that, but I knew it from the last time I done research for my show 2 years ago. But yes, Avril Lavigne, one of the biggest Canadian stars. Of course, she rose to fame back in the early thousands, around 2000, I believe. And she had some great tunes like Skitter Boy and stuff like that. Celine Dion, well, there you go. Talk about crossovers. The French Canadian, a prime example of when Alle Français meets Canadians. And they mash together and they create something perfect. Celine Dion, absolutely amazing singer. She won the Eurovision with Switzerland back in, I think it was 1970. Color me wrong, I don't know, but it was definitely in the 70s. Around that time, she was very, very good. Great star. She still is a great performer. Songs such as Think Twice, songs such as she done one there with she didn't do it with Meatloaf, but Meatloaf done a copy of it since this. It was it's all coming back to me now. She done the original back in 1996. That was a great tune. So yeah, Celine Dion. She of course was a French Canadian. She went into the Eurovision for Switzerland. I suppose she had some Swiss connection, or they paid her off. I'm only joking. They didn't pay her. I don't know if they paid her off. You don't know. You just don't know, folks. But anyway, yes, the Celine Dion, French Canadian, and she's a pretty good ambassador for Canada, folks. Also, Leonard Cohen. Leonard Cohen, you're talking about a genius, a musical genius here. He done this, in one particular song stands out for me is Hallelujah. He done the original, I think it was the original, Hallelujah. Great performer, Leonard Cohen. You couldn't fault that man. What a voice. Also, Leonard Cohen, done the tune for, it was the main soundtrack for the film Natural Born Killers back in 1994. He performed that tune. It was called The Future. It was either called it was called The Future, but there was another name for that song as well, which is Murder. So that was a very provocative tune. Really pushed the envelope as far as the dialogue he used in the song, the lyrics, I should say, and it really pushed the envelope with the content. And jumping on board with Oliver Stone's Natural Born Killers as well was a bit risque in his career, so it was for Cohen's career, but then he was always a bit eccentric with his views and his career and stuff, so maybe he didn't look at it as that way at all. Also, when you look at Canadians, you think about Bryan Adams. Bryan Adams. Please forgive me, but I'm going to talk about Bryan Adams for a minute. Pardon the pun. I told you there'd be puns, folks. You don't like puns, head over to another IGN or somewhere. But but Bryan Adams, what a man. He is somebody that really brought us some great stuff. He teamed up with Rod Stewart and Sting that time. Remember that time? And they thought they were the Musketeers. They weren't. That was, of course, All for Love. It was, of course, they thought they were Musketeers. They couldn't even say the phrase. They called their song All for Love. It was the soundtrack to Three Musketeers, which their phrase was, of course, All for One and One for All. But anyway, Bryan Adams, great entertainer. Of course, known for that tune, The Summer of '69. Great tune indeed. I remember myself and the band I used to be in, the Verified, used to sing that song. That was fun. Also, he really was one of the best, because his Best Of album, The Best of Me, was a great album. Also, we can look at more of the greatest musicians in Canadian history when you look at the likes of Michael Bublé. And I said I wouldn't be talking about modern stuff, but Bublé has been around for about 4 or 5 years now in the music, maybe longer. You know, you can you can contradict me on that one. You can tell me I'm wrong with that one too if you want, but maybe longer. By the way, you can head up the chat page on the side of this if you're watching live. That would be something to do if you feel like doing it. But if you don't feel like doing it, don't do it. But anyway, Michael Bublé, one of the greatest singers. I think one of the greatest voices you could listen to. He really is a great performer these days. Then we go from him to somebody you mightn't say is that great, but then other people think he's amazing. So this one's out. The jury's out there, folks. He's only a young guy. I don't think much about him. I'd never follow his stuff, but then he probably is good at what he does. I'm talking about Justin Bieber. If you're a believer, as he calls it instead of believer, if you're a believer and you're into Justin Bieber, fair play to you. You know, I think he's probably very good for what he does. I don't go judging people. I don't believe in judging people, saying they're crap and stuff. But I do think that he is a bit outspoken at times, and he should probably respect more of the older people that paved the way for him in his profession. But I'm not going to start giving out about him. I just think, you know, that's entertainment. That's society we live in. Unfortunately, some people get like that. Also, someone that was really a big deal in her time, and she is also a Canadian hero as far as music's concerned. And I'm talking about Joni Mitchell. Joni Mitchell, yeah, one of the big deals at the minute actually is the fact that Joni Mitchell actually lost her voice due to she had to get vocal surgery or something. There's some story anyway in the press that Joni Mitchell has actually lost her voice, so that's very sad, unfortunately. But yeah, she was also a big deal in Canadian music history. As we move on now, talk about other Canadian stars. Nelly Furtado. Remember Nelly Furtado? I remember going to Slane in 2001, and Nelly Furtado being a big deal at the time, and she was actually one of the acts in Slane at that U2 homecoming concert in Slane, and that was a lot of fun. Nelly Furtado, and she had a few big songs out at the time, but she was one of the support acts for U2 that night. Also, people like Rufus Wainwright, another big Canadian star in the music scene. Other people like Sarah McLachlan, she was a big deal, uh, great singer. Um, Others like Paul Anka, very popular singer down through the years. That man was revered all over the place. Great, great singer. Um, Katie Lang, another big name in Canadian music. Also, Shania Twain. That don't impress me much. Remember that one, folks? That was a fun song. Shania Twain. I always thought it was an amazing story Shania Twain had. She was one of, I think it was 12 kids, and she was the oldest of the family, and she had to look after her kids. Her parents died, and it was a horrible, tragic upbringing, and she had to look after these kids. They were like orphans, and Shania had to look after the whole family growing up and stuff. That was very tragic happenings with the Twain family, and Shania then went on to become one of the biggest country stars in history, one of the biggest female country stars in history. And ironically enough, she's a Canadian one, and most of them come from down around Texas and places like that. But Shania Twain, a Canadian country star, which really, she made a big name for herself, folks. She was a real big deal. But anyway, we'll move on now, talk about more Canadian music stars from down through the years. Um, People such as, let me see here. Well, we'll go on now. We'll talk a bit about, come back with a few more Canadian music stars. We're going to talk now a bit about the great Canadian actors from down through the years, and a bit about what they have done in the acting scene, the film world. Um, Keanu Reeves. we're looking at names here, and the great stuff that pops up from these names. We start with Keanu Reeves. A lot of people don't like Keanu Reeves because he's very bland and stuff. He can bore you a bit, but he was great. In some of his early films, he was very, very good. Like he was in the likes of Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey and Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. That was fun stuff, folks. Also, he was in the likes of, uh, in his earlier days, Brotherhood of Justice, which was a very good show. It was actually a TV film, but I remember getting the DVD a good few years ago, and watching it and thinking it was excellent. That one also featured a young Keanu Reeves. I said that that one also featured another young Canadian star, Kiefer Sutherland, and actually Canadian. I say he's actually Irish Canadian. His father, Donald Sutherland, and himself, of course, Irish Canadian. So, but Keanu Reeves also has had some amazing films down through the years. Like you could do I could do a show totally based on the films of Keanu Reeves. Like he's done stuff such as Johnny Mnemonic. He's done stuff such as Chain Reaction. He's done films such as the. He's done other films such as Constantine. Um, some amazing stuff, and actually one that I would like to put out there and for you to go watch it because it is amazing is a film called A Scanner Darkly. I was informed about this film, A Scanner Darkly, by one of my old college buddies, a few of my old college buddies who had watched it, and they told me you should check out this A Scanner Darkly, and I really love that one because it's all about, well, I'm not going to tell you what it's all about, but it's when animation meets reality, and it's kind of it's blurred lines between animation and reality, and it's a really interesting concept the way they make this film. It also features Winona Ryder. It also features Robert Downey Jr. and a couple of other big names. Woody Harrelson's on there. So yes, A Scanner Darkly, very, very good show if you'll ever check it out. Keanu Reeves, as I said, we could spend all day talking about this great star from the history of Canadian film, but he definitely has done a lot of stuff down through the years. Also, big names in Canadian film down through the years. Christopher Plummer. This man has done it all. He's an older star. He is in his 80s now, but he is just full of life. He's done so much stuff, and he's doing more and more stage stuff as well. He's British Canadian, I believe. he's more. I think he grew up in England and moved over to Canada then, and he's got Canadian connection and that, but he is Canadian. Christopher Plummer, one of the legends of all time. Also, Kiefer Sutherland, as we mentioned, one of the biggest stars in Canadian film history. For his dad, Donald Sutherland, Irish Canadian, and Kiefer he's done it all, folks. He has become a massive. Like most people go from being on a TV show into being in a film, being a film actor, like the likes of Bruce Willis, started in Moonlighting, and the likes of Danny DeVito started in Taxi along with Christopher Lloyd, and other people started on TV shows. So many, so many. But this guy, who is, of course, Kiefer Sutherland, he started in films, in low-budget films like the one we mentioned, Brotherhood of Justice, and then he went on to become big star for the likes of The Lost Boys, Stand By Me, Flatliners, and he was associated with that group of young actors in the 80s as well. That was the Brat Pack. Of course, the Brat Pack consisted of the likes of Emilio Estevez, the great Demi Moore. It also consisted of the likes of Molly Ringwald, as well as Andrew McCarthy, and many, many others. Rob Lowe, a few others. I don't think this guy Kiefer Sutherland was an exact, real close friend of them guys, but he was he branched off as part of that Brat Pack, and he was one of the guys who rose to stardom around the same time as these great actors in the Brat Pack. So yes, he went on to be in the Three Musketeers movie. He also went on to be in the likes of he was in so many great films over the years, but he was in A Few Good Men as well, which is a great film. He was in A Time to Kill. So many great stuff in Kiefer Sutherland down through the years, and also he went on to be in 24, that great TV show 24, which is a very interesting concept as well. Something that hasn't been done much. I don't think it's ever been done before its inception into the film world or into the TV world. That each episode is a 1 hour in real time, which is something that hasn't been done really before, which is a very interesting concept. Joshua Jackson, another guy in the as a Canadian star, he actually he made his name in Dawson's Creek, and then he went on to be in other films. Hasn't become a massive star, but he is definitely in a few interesting films. One being that great film that depicts the life of Bobby, or depicts the death or surround the events surrounding the death of Bobby Kennedy, of course, entitled Bobby, which was directed by Emilio Estevez. But anyway, also interesting stuff here. Another few great actors from Canada. Eugene Levy. Now there, my friends, is a legend. He really was a legend in Canadian film, and he was a big name in SCTV with some of the great skits he done with fellow best friend and comedy star John Candy. They done some of the great skits on SCTV, which is Second City Television, which was based in Toronto, Canada, and that was like the next best thing from Saturday Night Live, which was also a nighttime satirical comedy show. But Eugene Levy, one of the greatest comedy stars, and he went on to be famous in a lot of stuff as he got older, and of course, more recently being in the American Pie series as the dad in American Pie, of course. And it was very, very funny, some of the scenes he is in that one. And he's also very, very funny in most of the stuff he does on most of his skits with John Candy, as well as that. He was in some good films with him as well. And he was in some good films in his earlier career as well. That is, of course, Eugene Levy. Okay, we'll move on now. Talk about one or two other big name actors from Canada. Neve Campbell is a top actress from Canada. She, of course, was in films such as Wild Things and also films such as Scream. She was one of the big names in Scream, and Scream 1, Scream 2, Scream 3, all the Screams. And uh, you know, when you some of the scenes in that film make you scream. But anyway, Neve Campbell she made a name for herself as a prime example of somebody that makes their name in TV and went on to film. She actually made her name in I think it was called Five of Us or Five of Us. It was a TV show back in the day. So yes, Neve Campbell. Haven't heard much about her lately. I don't know if she's still full time at the acting, but she definitely made her mark back in the day. Well, when you think about Canadian actors, you think about people in Canada that really have made a mark. You think about Leslie Nielsen. Leslie Nielsen made his mark in films down through the years. He's done stuff like the Naked Gun, 2.5, and the Naked Gun, and then the Naked Gun 33 1/3. Some of the great stuff. And then, of course, he started that with Priscilla Presley, the wife of legendary Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll. And he also has done crossovers with the WWE, WWF. At the time, he was on the case of trying to track down The Undertaker back in '94. Remember when they were leading up to SummerSlam '94, stuff like that. He's really delved into that world as well, and he's done so much great stuff. Leslie Nielsen, great legend. Christopher Plummer was involved in that whole WWF storyline at the time as well, I remember. But Leslie Nielsen has done stuff like Spy Hard. He's done that one, the Dracula movie that he played Dracula. That was funny stuff. He's done a lot of them skits down through the years, but he definitely was a top-class comedy actor. Also, people like, let me see, Catherine O'Hara, another famous Canadian actress, Catherine O'Hara. Also, Martin Short. Now, Martin Short, another prime example of the great comedians from Canada, the great comedian / film stars in Canada. Martin Short is probably one of the best. We recently seen him on SNL's 40th anniversary. He was doing a skit along with one of the more modern day big names in comedy, and it was very funny. One of the where the girl was playing Beyonce and he was playing himself, Martin Short. It was a very funny skit. But Martin Short was in some great stuff over the years. But the one that comes to mind when you think about his great work is The Three Amigos. That was a cool show. He starred along with Steve Martin and Chevy Chase for that one, and that was top notch. You couldn't beat that one, folks. Martin Short and The Three Amigos. He also starred in some great stuff over the years. I remember him in that one with Tim Allen, where he played Jack Frost. That was very funny. It was, of course, the Santa Claus 3, The Escape Clause. That was great stuff as well from Martin Short. He has done it all over the years. Great stand-up comedy as well, and he plays the little guy very funny, very well as well. With a little guy he can do the voices and stuff. It was very, very good stuff. Corey Haim's a big deal in Canadian film. Of course, he became a big deal in the 80s with the two Coreys, Corey Haim and Corey Feldman. They done a lot of films together down through the 80s and that. Of course, they were in The Lost Boys together, and then they went on. More recently, actually, they done The Lost Boys 2, but that came out as part of a special edition of the Lost Boys movie. But I don't think the second one really lived up to expectations of the fanboys or of the big followers of that series. But also, we can look at other big names from Canada, big film people, and we think about Phil Hartman. Of course, Phil Hartman died in the 90s, but he had a lot of interesting roles as well. He was very famous on Saturday Night Live in the 70s and 80s and the 90s, and he became a pretty big deal on Saturday Night Live. Very, very funny guy, Phil Hartman. And also a guy that really, like at the moment, he is very topical, this guy that I'm about to name, and he was probably the driving force, if not the number one guy behind the Terminator franchise. Like I talked about the Terminator franchise on my last live show here on CKTV, and of course we talked about the whole Terminator franchise that a few days ago. And this guy James Cameron is the guy that really brought about this whole franchise. Directed the first one, directed the second one, had a big hand in the third one, and now for the fifth one, he has been kind of like a guy to go to. He was the go-to guy for the makers of it, and he really, I think Cameron, he is the brains to make it all work if they do any more Terminators. He's done, of course, the Titanic, which was the biggest box office breaking movie of all time back in 1996 or 97. And then he also went more lately, 2009 or so, he done that great film Avatar, which broke all box office records again. So when you think about it, people in the film world, or the intellectual film fans, or the thespians, if you will, wouldn't regard maybe James Cameron as the greatest filmmaker of all time, but he has, like, the box office and the money volume that comes in speaks for itself. He has made two of the biggest box office breaking films of all time. When you think about that little fact there, you know you're onto something. But yes, James Cameron, one of the greatest legends of all time as far as his movies go. Some of his stuff wasn't great. Some of his stuff was absolutely amazing. Other people from the film world that you can think about would be John Candy, who was brilliant. He was an excellent star in the world of film down through the years. Candy, of course, bringing everything he had. Such a passionate guy in the world of film. He really was probably the greatest actor, like the greatest comedy actor to ever grace the silver screen in his day. He, of course, along with another guy who I'm going to talk about now, Bill Murray, them two really, in my mind, two of the greatest comedy actors of all time. Candy, of course, used the fact that he was a big guy to his advantage in films, and he used that. He was one of the funniest people, and such a down-to-earth kind of character too. You know, he was really, really a top-notch actor. But in films such as his earlier roles, such as Stripes, along with Bill Murray, also films such as Summer Rental, films such as The Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, films such as The Great Outdoors, and Uncle Buck, and the likes of Only the Lonely, the likes of so many great films. But there was one particular film that I thought was very, very funny, and that one was it was the one about Canada and America going to war. That was very funny altogether. That was very good stuff. Like, and it was, if you've ever seen it, if you haven't seen it, definitely go check it out, because you'll get a great laugh from that one. And I'm going to try and find it here on YouTube and play it, a bit of it with the soundtrack, because it was so good. The soundtrack is entitled "God Bless America Again," and that was one of the greatest, one of the funniest soundtracks of all. John Candy actually plays an American in the film, which is interesting. And let's see if we can find it here on YouTube, folks. here's a bit of it here now.
Again, you see all the trouble that she's in. Voice her pretty face, dry her eyes. God,
Very funny song. Go check it out. The lyrics are hilarious in that one. And it's, of course, Canada loves to poke fun at America because it's really loud neighbors and they get it back. You know what I mean? There's a lot of interesting relationships there between them neighbors. But Canada and the United States, no love lost there, but they like each other really. You know what I mean? It's just a friendly rivalry. But the film is what I'm saying is go check out the film Canadian Bacon, which stars John Candy, and that is so funny. The some of the stuff in the film is it's hilarious actually. But yeah, so God Bless America Again is the theme song to the film. Hopefully I don't get copyrighted for playing that there, but I won't. I don't think I will. It's an old song, and I think you're allowed to use stuff that's over 50 years old, so it should be okay. Right, well, we're going to talk a bit about the world of professional wrestling now. And this time, we're talking the likes of the great Canadian wrestlers from down through the years. You look at Bret the Hitman Hart. You look at the British Bulldog, Davy Boy Smith. You look, well, he's actually British, but he became part of a group in Canada known as the Hart Foundation. And these guys were like the Hart family and the people connected to the Hart family, and they became a big deal in the world of wrestling. And around the 1997 mark, they became a group, like what's known as a faction in the world of professional wrestling, and they went into rivalries with D-Generation X, and DX standard for everything that's brash and bold in the new America in the 90s, and of course the Hart Foundation stood for everything that they believed in, and they of course went on some rants in the ring. I remember them coming out during the King of the Ring in 1996, which I'm going to cover in another video shortly. But anyway, they came out during this and they talked about the fact that America is like a giant toilet and stuff. It was very funny. And Hart, of course, Bret Hart was turning heel at this time because he was such as what they call a baby face earlier on in his career, and then he became a heel, which was a bad guy, and he said all this stuff about America and started saying all this stuff about American fans and stuff. And it was very, very good. And it really drew the lines as far as went over the line and brought in the Attitude Era kind of with that big rivalry there. And then, of course, Bret Hart went on to be screwed in Montreal. And when I talk about screwed, I mean he was meant to just to get disqualified from the match and not lose the title on Canadian soil. But what happened was Vince McMahon got them to ring the bell and got them to they got him to do the honors of giving up the belt to Shawn Michaels in Canada. They were going to leave it and do it in the south of the border in the United States, but they didn't do that, and it was decided that it was decided that it was going to happen that Bret lose the title the next night on Raw in America. But what happened was he lost it in Canada, and it wasn't agreed, and it wasn't scripted for that to happen, and it was a whole controversy, and it was entitled it went down in infamy, if you like, as the Montreal Screwjob, which was very funny. well, it wasn't very funny, but at the time it was shocking for wrestling fans of all ages. But I think it was, as you look down now, because they have made up and everything has been, they have gotten closure, if you will. They now you look back on it, and it's an absolutely very interesting turn of events. But yes, indeed, the Montreal Screwjob lives on in infamy in the world of wrestling. And when you think about Canada as well, some of the great wrestling stuff in Canadian history, you think about Stampede Wrestling. Stu Hart, which is Brett's father, he brought about Stampede Wrestling in the 1930s, I believe, and he built up a great dynasty of Canadian wrestlers. And then Vince McMahon bought out Stampede Wrestling in the mid '80s, and that became part of what became the WWE, of course, nowadays, where he bought up all the competition. But also there was Maple Leaf Wrestling up in the Toronto area, like Toronto and over to Montreal, and some of the great stars as well from Montreal. You got the Rougeau brothers, of course. One of them went on to become the Mountie, who was a big character in the WWF in 92, 93, in 91, 92. And some of the great stars as well from the earlier years in Canadian wrestling include Black Bart and people like, I believe, the likes of, also we can talk about the likes of Chris Jericho. Chris Jericho, one of the great stars of Canadian wrestling, comes from Winnipeg in Manitoba, Canada. People like Chris Benoit, who, of course, his name lives on in infamy as well because of the sad turn of events that happened in 2007, where it's actually about, I think it was around this time in 2007, where he, of course, he actually killed his wife and son. It was a very sad turn of events. They said that the autopsy was done on his brain and stuff after that, a long time after that, and actually it was discovered that he had a brain of an 80-year-old suffering from Alzheimer's. So that was very, very sad. And his name has not been breathed in wrestling since, but in the WWE, they don't like to speak of him and stuff because of what he done and that. But you can't really look at it that way either. I think because of the state of his brain, it was horrible. But as I actually have read, I've read this since that the former AWA owner, who is Vern Gagne, he actually body slammed someone in his nursing home, and he actually killed that person because he had Alzheimer's as well, and he was old, and he actually had the same situation going on in his head and his brain, and just goes to show that Benoit is not the only one that actually done that. So I don't think you can blame Benoit really in his right state of mind for what he done. But anyway, very interesting stuff there. Canadian wrestlers from down through the years, some great ones. You also have the likes of Lance Storm, Edge and Christian, who are also big names in Canadian wrestling history. But you could go on forever talking about the great wrestlers from Canada down through the years. We have talked about some of the greatest musicians, some of the greatest film stars, and some of the greatest, of course, one of my biggest interests, professional wrestling, some of the greatest in professional wrestling from the land of Canada. And I have been the Keoster, folks. It's been great bringing it to you, and it is my look at my little retrospective of Canadian history in the world of entertainment. And for CKTV, it's here doing some live streams these days, and I'm loving every minute of it. And I'm going to be getting, by the way, I've got a few people in line to bring in to talk about some of the great stuff that I have planned on this show, on the Keoster Live show. I'm looking for them to join me on Google Hangouts. I'm putting it out there to you folks. If anybody wants to come on and join the Keoster here in Keogh on Google Hangouts, be my guest, folks. I'd love to have you on, talk about any topics you're into. I'm into most topics. I can research most topics and enjoy them. So my specialities are probably wrestling and film, stuff like that. But I'm quite happy to talk about whatever you guys are interested in, or if you have something to promote, be my guest, come on and promote it. and I'd be really happy to bring that to you. Of course, I am capable of recording live now for YouTube, so if you've ever got any events or anything, maybe down the line, we can organise me to record for you kind of thing. But yes, indeed, it's great to be on YouTube. It's great to be bringing you the stuff that we love. So happy Canada Day to all my Canadian cousins out there, all my Canadian people, my bros from Canada. Great to see you all, folks. Dudes and dudettes, take it easy. It's been the Keoster, Kyo. It's been CKTV. And, oh, Canada, Keoster, over. And out.